Welcome to the Infrastructure Podcast. Welcome to this live recording of the Infrastructure Podcast here at the newly refurbished main gallery at the Building Centre in London. My name is Anthony Oliver and I'm joined today by Baroness Hilary Armstrong, Chair of the Independent Commission on Neighbourhoods and lifelong advocate for communities and regeneration. And we're going to explore one of the most important, yet perhaps overlooked questions in public policy, namely how do we re-establish the concept of decent neighbourhoods as a means to renew the country from the ground up. So, Baroness Armstrong, thanks for joining me and welcome to the Infrastructure Podcast.
Thanks very much indeed, and please call me Hilary.
I will do indeed. Well, some background. Hilary has spent her career at the intersection of politics and policy and community life, and today we're really going to draw heavily on this experience, from her work as a social worker in Sunderland to her time as cabinet minister in the last Labour government, shaping the New Deal for communities. And we're going to talk about what's gone wrong in the past decade, perhaps, and what can be done now to bring new hope across Britain's neighbourhoods. The Independent Commission on Neighbourhoods, ICON, is dedicated to understanding how neighbourhoods can drive national renewal. And in the spring, it is set to publish its Think Neighbourhoods report on why and how investment and focus on neighbourhoods can revitalise lives across the UK. So look out for that when it comes out. Certainly, it is a really interesting moment for housing and for community development. The government is pressing forward with its 1.5 million new homes initiative. And as we heard on the podcast last week, it's just given the thumbs up to the New Towns Task Force plans for 12 new communities across the UK. Meanwhile, host Grenfell, the challenge to build and retrofit homes to a safer, warmer and more carbon efficient standard continues to grow. So it's a tough brief, but let's get stuck in right now. Hilary, so what in practical policy terms is a well-functioning neighbourhood?
My goodness. The reality is we all live in a neighbourhood.
Right.
And most of us grow up being very proud of where we come from and want that place to succeed, but then we also want the place that we're living in now to be somewhere that is safe, that offers opportunity for learning, for meeting people, for communications, and for people who will inspire and give aspiration about the potential. And too many of our neighbourhoods simply don't do that anymore.
Well, I mentioned the government's 1.5 million homes target and the plans for new towns. And in many ways, that's kind of building the infrastructure that makes it all happen. Why do you believe this neighbourhood approach is essential for delivering that infrastructure and delivering on the missions for growth and prosperity?
Because I've worked in too many places where that doesn't happen, and where people are more likely to be unemployed, more likely to have low skill base, low education base, more likely to have poor health, and where they are very much tied into their community, their local area, but actually their local area doesn't give them the opportunities to meet other people and to really do things.
And it's those opportunities which are going to help to drive that mission for growth. You identify in your report, there's a lot in it. It's got 613 mission critical neighbourhoods, you call them, the most deprived areas in the UK. How are they selected then? What makes that changing them around so vital for national renewal? Well,
on the things that I've been saying, it was mainly on areas where people die younger, their health is poorer, their mental health is likely to be an issue, they're more likely to be not in work, to have a disability, and the housing may well also be an issue, but it is essentially about the nature of the people and the opportunities for the people. And they feel the world's forgotten about them.
And that point about the world forgetting about, again, you mentioned it in the report. It paints a stark picture around the failure to maintain our neighbourhoods. It says we see that the 2000s were broadly a period of national and neighbourhood improvement, but this trend didn't hold. Between 2011 and 2021, a third of the gains made in the 2000s were lost. So what happened?
Change of government, austerity, getting rid of some of the things that people felt gave them something, like Sure Start centres.
Yeah.
You wouldn't believe it. The number of people who remember and have good thoughts about Sure Start centres and why did we lose them. So we then had we had a financial crash and all of that. And when the last government came round to levelling up, they largely saw it as an issue of buildings.
Right.
And if you improve the building, but don't change the opportunities and the wherewithal that people can relate to, it doesn't mean anything to them.
And that's where policy comes in. You've got to get that policy right. And you say, can policy make a difference in our disadvantaged neighbourhoods? The answer is yes. Is that policy happening now under this new Labour government?
It is happening. The issue now is delivery. The government have now put a fair amount of money. I can't criticise the amount of money that has been put aside for, what they want to do in neighbourhoods. And it's in more than just the place-based small neighbourhoods. It is in other bits of mainstream funding. Still more to go, still more to argue about and still more to get right. But nonetheless, they're on a track that I think could mean we begin to regenerate again.
Yeah. I referred to the 2017 Grenfell fire, which in many ways laid bare the neglect of investment in decent social housing, but in many ways it did also underline, I suppose in some tragic way, and reinforce the value of strong neighbourhoods and community. Do you see it that way?
I'm not sure that that's all that Grenfell taught us. Grenfell happened in a block where it was essentially social housing. But the building construction at that time around a lot of places, private as well as social, was not what it should have been.
Yeah.
And for me, austerity, where we reduced the number of building inspectors in local government, had an enormous effect. And I speak with a bit of heart in this because I'm in a very nice building now, but we've had cladding issues and scaffolding up for 2 years and they haven't finished yet. And I think we're all being taken to the cleaners because they didn't sort out building inspection and keep building inspectors. So the truth is that leaseholders frequently didn't know what was going into the building and didn't keep good records. And so as they uncover things, they find a whole host of new problems. And it must be costing an absolute fortune. And I think those people who are now investing in being a cladding company are doing quite well out of it.
Right. Well, no, there's some... Just discuss.
That's going to be the most controversial thing I think I say tonight.
No, but the industry certainly is looking very hard at itself. And should be looking very hard at itself.
Absolutely.
Because every report that's come out, Dame Judith Hackett laid bare the failings of the construction sector.
Yeah.
Is the construction industry responding fast enough and deep enough?
No, they're not.
They're not. So what's going to change that?
I think, again, building up in local government, people who know what should be happening and who work with the tenants and the residents to actually make sure they get the best out of things. Because otherwise it is simply seen as, well, we've lost a lot of money over cladding, we've now got to recoup that money. And it's about more than that. Yeah. And of course, social housing is a particular issue because the government has not been funding the the sorting out of social housing.
Yeah. Which brings us to an interesting conundrum that any government faces, is matching or supplementing the public investment with necessary and vital private investment. And you refer to programs such as the lottery-funded big local program as game changers in terms of maintaining neighbourhood cohesion. And you say you estimate that 102 million invested in social infrastructure through this program may have contributed 323 million in direct fiscal savings. Maybe 1.1 over 5 years. What's the balance then in your mind between government funding, private sector funding, and charity funding?
Oh, I think all have got a role, and all are really important to actually opening all this up, concentrating on it, and making sure that we really understand what growth means. At the moment, too many people see growth as a very outside thing that has nothing to do with them. Actually, building social capital is an important way in which you help growth, and actually making sure that we all are contributing to making sure that people like this are able to contribute to our society, are able to get skills. That is the way in the future we will be able to grow. And it's in the charity sector, it's in private sector, and in communities that matters. It matters to all of us. And unless we get hold of that, we're really all going to suffer.
And it's in everyone's interest to get hold of that, whether it's the private sector or public sector.
Absolutely.
ICON, of course, is that's really what it's all about, trying to get people to focus on this issue around neighbourhoods. You do seem to be influencing government. You know, the September's £5 billion Pride in Place announcement explicitly states that strong neighbourhoods and communities are vital to drive growth. I mean, are you getting your message across, Hilary? Are ministers now listening to the neighbourhoods message?
Oh, they are. I had a meeting this afternoon with the relevant minister, who is very enthusiastic about this and needs to make sure that the people who are advising her in the department actually understand it. Because what has also happened in the last 14 years is the capacity to understand community organisation, to develop community leaders, has disappeared. I trained community and youth workers at Sunderland Poly for 11 years. That course has disappeared now. Around the country, those sorts of things have disappeared. And there's not the lived experience in government or in local government of people who've worked as community organisers in their neighbourhoods and then gone into other jobs in government. So nobody in the community section of MCH LG, whatever its name is, I never get it right. But nobody, I think, has any experience of actually delivering. They've got experience of thinking about things, but not of actually delivering. And that is a huge issue in our society now.
I'm going to come on to a bit more about your background and what's driving this clear passion that still hugely exists there. But ICON is independent. How do you ensure the Commission's voice is heard and remains independent without being captured by the vast number of political agendas that are out there, I suppose, like bear traps for you?
Oh, by being straightforward, by looking at the evidence very carefully and reflecting that out there. Now, I'm very pleased when government responds to that. And I want to work in a way that enables them to respond. But that doesn't mean I'm going to be a patsy and just say what I think they want to hear. At the end of the day, that won't do them any good either. No.
I get the impression that you wouldn't ever be a patsy, Hilary. I'm going to get some questions from the audience in a moment, but just a little bit about you first, if I may. I mean, you began your career, as I said at the top, as a social worker in Sunderland. I mean, how did those early experiences shape your understanding of what neighbourhoods need? And I suppose shape the passion that we see now, still evident in you as a politician?
Well, I'm going to say something you won't expect. I grew up in a household where we were all interested and involved. My dad was a local councillor in Sunderland, And he used to take me around to wherever we went. But then when I finished my degree, I got a place on a course to do social work as a postgrad. But before I did that, I went to Kenya for 2 years with voluntary service overseas and worked up in the hills in Kenya. And that changed my life.
Right.
Because I learned what was important to me, what mattered to me, and what I wanted to do when I came back, as well as I hope making sure that I was working with the girls in school well and with the environment well. But then I knew I wanted to go back to the Northeast, so I did my social work, and I actually went back to Newcastle and worked in Newcastle. And I worked out in Newcastle. I didn't really want to be a social worker because I wanted to get involved before things had gone really wrong and you had to take people into care. So I went back to Sunderland and I worked because they had a very interesting deputy chief executive of the council who knew that because the shipyards were closing, because the mines were closing, their community life was changing fundamentally. And I wanted to be part of what do you do then? And I knew those sorts of communities because one grandfather had been a miner and the other grandfather was a boilermaker in the shipyard. And I knew about that life. And I was quite pleased some of it was changing.
Right.
Because the community life that provided was mended all the important things, and women were at home looking after the kids and looking after the community issues. And if I'd had to live with that, I'd probably have still been a housewife in Sunderland.
Yeah.
But I was able to do other things.
Yeah, you were able to do it.
And I was able to bring those into the community work I was doing.
Which takes me, I mean, your father, Ernest Armstrong, was an MP and Methodist lay preacher. How did his values, I suppose, influence your approach to politics? You mentioned you went away to Kenya and you found out what mattered to you. Were there the same things that what mattered to your dad?
Oh, my dad and I got on extremely well. He used to take me to visit, you know, people living on the estate that he was the councillor for. And I remember going into one where, you know, they were in a terrible state and they had the bath full of coal because they had a coal fire, of course, in those days. And they just didn't know what to do with themselves. And my dad just had to start and unpick all of that. And Dad and I used to talk about those things all the time. And he used to say to us, I don't care what you do, me and my brother, I don't care what you do, but you have a responsibility to give something back to the community.
Right.
So that's what I grew up with. That was the only thing that, if you like, defined how he thought we ought to be.
Which, of course, you did, and you made it all the way into the cabinet of the government of the United Kingdom under Tony Blair. And you oversaw the New Deal for communities, which was a seminal bit of work in many ways in this area. I mean, looking back, what worked, what didn't work about that programme?
I think what worked largely came because there was a real commitment from across government to change experiences for people who really were having a difficult time.
Yeah.
And the Prime Minister, and I often talk to him now, and I think, I don't know how on earth you thought about that, but he established the Social Exclusion Unit, which gave us really good reports about what was going wrong in places. And I used those as local government minister, as housing minister, and then in regeneration. And what worked was we built the whole programme around how do we empower people locally so that they own what's going on and they understand what's going on and they know that they're not being told how to live their lives.
Yeah. Which has huge echoes for what is needed in many ways today. Which brings me fast forward to your current report, where you, in the forward, you write about lessons not implemented from the past. I mean, is there a sense of Groundhog Day in your world where the lessons that we learn, we just don't really implement? What does the new generation of leaders and policymakers need to do to learn from those lessons today?
Well, I think that there is a huge issue in the way we run government, that any new government is not supposed to ask the civil service what went wrong, what did they say about this, what were the policy implications of making the decision there, because you're not supposed to be given any understanding of how the previous government did things. And that means there's no institutional memory in government
just starting from square one every time.
They start again every time. And this is also true for too many of the civil servants. Because the civil service was hollowed out, the new people coming in, very often, they just don't find out what used to happen and how it used to be. Now, I'm not being nostalgic and saying it has to be the way it was. What I'm saying is, unless you understand it, then you don't get it right the next time.
Which in many ways makes it a great moment, I presume, for an organisation like ICON and for a new push for a new neighbourhood-led renewal agenda.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting because what we're also saying to them, and they're listening, is that the public really liked things like Sure Start. We have to have a programme that offers mothers in particular, but parents, support in parenting at an early age so that the kids don't end up in real problems later on, and all sorts of things like that. People talk about that with fond memories, and most of the young ministers in government, didn't realise that. So they're listening.
Well, there have been decades in many ways of area-based initiatives, City Challenge, New Deal for Communities, and now Pride in Place. What's different then about the approach which you are advocating now?
Oh, the main thing is that it's about people first.
Right.
Building social infrastructure, yes. However, doing it with people so that they feel empowered by it and they feel they are in control. Because you go and knock on doors these days and they just think the government is giving them hell.
Right, yeah. Well, your interim report also calls for a lot of prioritisation, focusing on 2% of neighbourhoods with the greatest need. How can government do that without leaving other places behind them?
By actually acknowledging that there are some programmes that should be universal, like Sure Start was. Sure Start was universal, but those of us who were organising it were trying to say it needs to, within the universal offer, concentrate on the people who are most disadvantaged. And if you do that, then it's better for everybody. And actually, if you've continually got neighbourhoods that are a drain on a local town, on a city, on an area.
These mission critical neighbourhoods,
if you've got a neighbourhood like that, people are frightened of it.
Right.
They don't want their kids to walk through the estate to get to the park. And actually tackling things like that mean that their general environment within that town and city improves. And that all of us get, as I say, a better opportunity because there is going to be growth there. Seems quite straightforward to me. I don't live in a neighbourhood that needs improvement, but my goodness, there's one down the road that I know does. And that if that neighbourhood is improved, then my life will be better.
Yeah. Well, you've highlighted the risk of trickle-down regeneration, but how would you describe trickle-down regeneration then?
I really don't know what trickle-down ever meant.
Right.
Because trickle-down suggests that basically there are people at the bottom who just capture or catch the drops that we allow them. Right. And that's not going to change their lives. Again, I've been talking to one of the MPs who's involved in another new town being built around in Milton Keynes. And I don't think there is a silver bullet, but I do think there are things that you can do that will improve the experience of people who go to live there. And he was saying that when they first built Milton Keynes, and he's now talking to people about this, the houses came first, but what they did was make sure that there was one house kept for community use until they built community facilities.
Right. Yeah.
But because, there's a time span, that's what they did originally. And he said, I think they should do that again. Because they could then sell the house once the community facilities are built. But again, you then need to work with people around what are going to be the community facilities that will most meet the needs of this particular group, at this particular estate or whatever.
It's interesting because if you look at the plans for the Milton Keynes expansion of the new towns, it starts off and the headlines are all about mass transit system, big infrastructure. Are we getting that wrong there? Should we be thinking at ground level first, what communities need?
Well, that's why I'm saying there's not a silver bullet, because you need all of those things to be planned in. People who live in London have no idea what it's like to live outside where there isn't a tube or a tram or a DLR.
Or a regular 6-minute bus service, yeah.
Yeah. And, I talked to a young lad last year who was 17. He'd left care, and the care organisation, the charity, had put him in a village in Durham. Fine. The village was 8 miles from the job centre. And he had to get at least 2 buses, cost him a fortune.
Yeah.
By the time he did that, he missed his appointment. So he was sanctioned. And when he said, but the bus didn't come, so whatever, they said, you could have walked 8 miles. Now, nobody in London would recognise that.
No. Because
that would never happen in London. And therefore, that is an important part of a neighbourhood.
And your research describes, I suppose, that result over the last 10 years as this lost decade for neighbourhoods.
Yeah.
In real terms, it is those real life experiences which you say justifies that.
Absolutely.
Well, the data that you refer to in your report shows deep concern over antisocial behaviour, litter, drugs in high need areas. Yet the Commission also emphasises social infrastructure, parks, libraries, youth centres, community hubs. How can government and local agencies rebuild the trust and the pride which is needed in those areas?
Well, by working with local people. So you need to have people who have got the capacity, who you support with the capacity to organise, who do surveys around, talk to local people. What are their priorities? And then you need to make sure you deliver those priorities first, so that they then trust you, and trust is the key word. They then trust you to go on and do other things. Yeah,
because without that trust, that's why you get antisocial behaviour. And I think that's what the last question was alluding to, I suppose. What do you need to put in place to get that trust? And it is...
it is empowering local people, so that you don't think you're telling them how they're going to live their lives.
And one of the phrases you use in your report is the collapse in social capital, the networks of trust and support within communities. How do you start to rebuild something as complicated and as deep as social capital?
Again, it's by connections and giving people the confidence that they can do other things. So I visit hubs to look at digital inclusion, and those hubs bring people together with a trusted volunteer.
Right.
And I've seen some remarkable things going on where people who've been stuck in their own house, stuck in their street. I used to work in a place in Sunderland that was 1.5 miles from the sea, and the kids never went to sea. And it's giving them the confidence and the support
and the
opportunity to go and do things and meet people that they wouldn't do otherwise. And as that confidence and opportunity builds up, so they will do more training, so they will do other things, which actually give them that opportunity.
But it does start with physical assets. Being
Some
built.
of it does.
So what's the role? How do you see the role of the developers, the planners, the architects, the engineers, in creating that social fabric, rebuilding that social capital within new communities. I mean, are we designing neighbourhoods, or are we still just designing housing estates?
I think too often we're just designing housing estates, but you cannot design a community without talking to folk.
Right.
You have to actually engage with people in that, that are going to be around and work with them to get that right. Again, I could tell you of, places we've been to where they've really done that well. And in one of them, they got the agreement of the council that they could do their own local plan that the council would then have to take into account. And that meant that any new developer coming to build new properties on their estate, they had to engage with the community group first.
Well, just to round us out, you talk about reservoirs of hope. What gives you the confidence that despite the challenges, despite all the naysayers and the things which are set to hold back the development of communities, what gives you the hope that renewal is possible? What would success look like in a decade from now?
Oh, crikey. In a decade from now, I would hope to see the data showing that things are changing. And my hope is that that's what people want. And if you work with them effectively, then they're much more likely to be able to get the improvements that are necessary. But it isn't going to be easy. I have to say social media makes it much more difficult. It can improve it, but it can also make it much more difficult.
But what, because people start campaigns against
and against
ideas.
Individuals or against anybody.
No one wants to stick their head above the parapet.
Yeah.
Well, we're recording this at the Building Centre, very much the hub of the UK built environment. What would you set as priorities then for planners, designers, architects and builders maybe listening to this podcast who want to try to make a change and to drive this development of new community-based infrastructure, new neighbourhoods?
Be enthusiastic about working with people rather than telling them what is a good design and what they should like. Right.
So listen to them.
Work with them.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Well, that's some very good advice for them all. I'm sure that they'll all take on. Hilary Armstrong, Baroness Armstrong, thanks so much for joining me today here at the Building Centre and on the Infrastructure Podcast. Some really interesting challenges. I think we all accept really big challenges facing society and the sector over the next decade and beyond, I'm sure. Yeah. So look, thanks very much for joining us here and explaining.
Thank you. Right.
Sadly, though, that is all we've got time for the Infrastructure Podcast today. We have got more in the pipeline and more guests to talk to as we continue to probe the big issues across the sector. If you haven't done so already, do check out the 137 episodes that are there ready for you to listen to and download, and go to infrastructure-podcast.com where you're going to find all the background information to share. So thanks for joining me here today. Thanks again to Hilary, and I look forward to seeing you again very soon. Thanks a lot.